this thing was just happening. She had just been taken into custody. And now that we've had a week to go through, where are we at this stage with Aung San Suu Kyi and the military and this power battle between the two?
Well, I think, as I said last week, I think the point we kind of ended on, I said, you asked a question about what happens next. And I said, it's very much going to depend on two factors. One is how the people of Myanmar themselves respond. And I think we've already seen incredible bravery and defiance by ordinary people coming out into the streets, banging pots and pans, doing the three-finger salute from the Hunger Games. All kinds of signs of defiance, wearing red ribbons for the National League for Democracy and so forth. And we've seen plenty of that. But there also has to be an international dimension. And I think that's what we haven't seen enough of yet. People need to hold the generals accountable and responsible for what they're doing.
Let's dig into that a bit more, Simon, because you're quite right. You and I talked about this. There needs to be this international reaction, and yet there hasn't been. There's almost been this sleepy condemnation from Western leaders and China hoping that, oh, you guys should settle this quietly and quickly. So why isn't there a stronger international response? We're witnessing a military coup of a democratically elected leader.
Yeah, and a military coup, it must be said, by a military who have not just blood on their hands, who have a history that is absolutely soaked in blood, who have done this before, who have committed atrocities against their own people, and who were responsible for a genocide, of course, against the Rohingya population in 2017. And I think what's really clear, I think should be clear to all of us, is this crisis is not going to be solved by statements of concern or simply by press statements, press releases, no matter how many exclamation marks are in them. It's going to require things like an arms embargo. It's going to require targeted sanctions on people like General Min Aung Hlaing. It's going to require total disinvestment from the two massive conglomerates, which are so closely tied with the military and control so much investment and so much of the economy of Myanmar. And that's what we haven't seen. So I think, we need to see governments do this on a bilateral level, and we need to see the UN Security Council wake up to the situation in Myanmar and take real action.
One bit of analysis has been that the international community is not reacting because there's nothing in it for them. This is not necessarily an oil-rich country. This is not necessarily a country that has much to offer the rest of the world economically. So let things happen as they happen. It might be a cynical perspective, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that it's true. I think a lot of people see it and tend to see international politics in terms of a kind of a chessboard. This country goes in this way, and the Chinese have influence here, and the Americans have influence there. Forgetting that what's at stake here is the fate of a country made up of millions and millions of people who have endured, as I said before, dictatorship in the past, who have only just begun a kind of transition to civilian rule and now have it thrown back and now going backwards in time. I think the response from people around the world has to be not in terms of the great chess game between the United States and China or some other kind of calculation, but has to be about those poor, long-suffering people in Myanmar themselves, who are like you and I, are no different, who have lives and dreams and aspirations and are now facing being crushed by more years under military dictatorship.
As you're speaking to us, Simon, we are showing pictures of the people in Myanmar banging their drums and pots as a form of demonstration. They're out in the streets. They're not covering their faces in terms of they're not hiding. And they're vocally demonstrating their opposition to what the military has done, something that would be dangerous, and it still is dangerous, but something that could be almost unthinkable a few decades ago in the same country, in the same region. So when you say millions and millions of people's lives are at risk or at stake in all of this, what could they potentially face? You've hinted at this bloody history, but what is the military capable of doing? Simon, do I still have you?
Yeah, I think I lost a little the end of your question there. We had a little bit of a glitch with the internet. Some kid probably in the neighborhoods playing, I don't know, games online or something like that. But I think where you're going with your question, and what I would say is, this is a military in 1988 that did not hesitate to shoot people down in the street, did not hesitate to detain democracy activists, to lock them up for years on end, to torture them and to do other sorts of things. This is a military that has, as I said, committed atrocities against its own people, not just the genocide in Rakhine State, but atrocities against other ethnic groups as well. So the threat facing ordinary people is immense. The bravery they are showing simply by just going into the streets and defying the military is immense. And I think it's incumbent upon the rest of us to show that little bit of solidarity that we can with them. And I especially call on governments, including the Canadian government, to sanction those generals, to make them pay, to make them realize that it cannot and it will not be business as usual post-coup.
Simon, let's talk about Aung San Suu Kyi. I don't believe she's been seen in the past week, but she has been charged, including this seemingly bizarre charge of having walkie-talkies. What exactly does all of this mean?
Yeah, I think when you're looking to lock somebody up and you start resorting to some kind of a walkie-talkie law, that shows you how desperate you are to get this person out of the political scene and into a prison cell. She hasn't been seen. She's facing, she's under arrest. She's going to be charged with some crime. The obvious idea is to try and eliminate her as best they can once again from the political life of Myanmar. Although, as you can see from the scenes that we've seen in the streets all week, she's certainly in the hearts and minds of many, many people in Myanmar. And I think that's something that absolutely drives General Min Aung Hlaing, the guy who's commanding this coup, absolutely crazy, that she is still immensely popular and the military is clearly immensely unpopular.
You said this word that sort of gave me shivers, which is to say they're going to try and eliminate her, and then you said from political life. Is it going to become a different kind of elimination? That I asked that with some hesitancy, but is that a possibility? Could they kill her?
I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, one doesn't want to speculate too much. I think the one thing that she certainly has going for her is that she does have that international reputation. She does have that name around the world. She does have a profile and stature, and I think that protects her. What worries me immensely are the many, many, many thousands of people who we've seen, again, at these protests, and activists, people involved in civil society organizations, journalists, human rights defenders, who do not have that international profile, and so whose lives are much, much more directly at risk. Keeping in mind, again, the guy commanding this coup already was the commander-in-chief who oversaw literally a genocide in 2017 in Myanmar. He's now the leader of the coup, and this is somebody who belongs in handcuffs at The Hague and not in the presidential palace.
And what is it they want? What does the military gain from this?
I mean, this is a military that is not used to sharing power. I mean, the military is not just a source of violent force in the society in Myanmar. The military also is a massive economic enterprise. As I mentioned before, they control these two conglomerates, which basically control a huge percentage of the economy in Myanmar. And so for them, this is about feathering their own nests, financially. It's about holding all power themselves. And I guess it's linked to an idea that somehow they can survive this, that the Chinese will back them, that the rest of the world will either quietly look the other way and hope that they just get on with businesses as usual, and that they can go on ruling like they used to. But, I certainly hope that is not what happens this time around.
Okay, let's see what happens in the days to come. Simon, thank you so much once again for your time.
Thank you, Natasha. Great to see you again.
You too. Simon Adams is the executive director